Welcome to Shotgun Sports USA. Recorded in the U.S. and streaming all over the world, I'm your host, Justin Barker, and I talk to shotgun shooters from all disciplines, championship-winning coaches, gun clubs, world-class target setters, vendors, and industry-leading companies that fuel the sport. If you're into clay target sports, you are at the right place for insider information from some of the best in the world every single week. Check us out online at shotgunsportsusa.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Instagram. Shotgun Sports USA is powered by Winchester Ammunition, the American legend. Also brought to you by Ultimate Shooting Accessories, Rick Hemingway's Chromatic Trap Cells, Sound Gear and Sound Gear Phantom, Comp and Choke, Clay Shooter Supply, and Clay Target Vision. This week on the podcast, my guest handles a lot of things for gun clubs. It's an all-in-one package that consists of sponsorship and sponsorship recruitment, the organization of vendors and sponsors, marketing campaigns, hospitality, team development and management, and something that everyone always mentions, a referee program. Her business is High Overall Sports Management, and her name is Julia Gilman. Okay, you've been mentioned on the podcast a few times and the good things that you've done for the sport, so I thought, why not have her on and let's find out exactly what you do. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Julia, you currently attend UT Martin, Tennessee, majoring in business management and marketing, correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you're also, which I find interesting, on the equestrian team there, and you're now an All-American. And I read somewhere you've been spotlighted as one of the nation's best flat riders.
That's what they've been saying.
Okay. Well, I've seen your post on Instagram, most of you and your team. Explain to me what a flat rider is.
So what's interesting that a lot of people don't know is we are an NCAA Division I sport, which is kind of fun. So what we do is a little bit different than what a lot of people see in the industry. So a flat rider is given a pattern that has a set of 8 to 10 maneuvers that we have to perform when we go and compete. And the structure of our competitions is a head-to-head format. So I would draw against, for example, an Auburn rider, and we would draw the same horse, and we have to perform the exact same pattern of set movements on that same horse, and each movement is scored 1 through 10. And then you arrive at a final score out of 100, and whoever has the higher composite score receives a point for their team. So a lot of people hear that and think there's a home team advantage, and there is in a certain element of it, but it always evens out kind of at the end of the season. But that's a little bit what we do.
Well, wouldn't a horse do what it wants to do, no matter who the rider is?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So that is one of our challenges for sure.
All right. So let's back up a little bit. You're majoring in business management and marketing. What made you go into this field?
So I went into business management and marketing mainly because it was a field that I thought I could study and step out of college and do just about anything I wanted to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the most appealing thing to me. And funny enough, after I did the World English, which was my first shoot, was when I was going into my freshman year of college. So I went in a little bit undecided what I wanted to do. And after being a part of the World English, I decided that management and marketing was definitely right up my alley and something I could put to good use.
How did you get involved with clay target sports?
So it's kind of a funny story. It goes all the way back to 2014. I'll never forget this day. I was sitting at the kitchen counter doing homework, and my dad, Jim Gilman, who's a big shooter, he came home and looked at me and said, "It's high time you get a job." I said, "Oh, okay." So the next day we jumped in the truck and went up to Northbrook Sports Club, which is about 30 minutes from where I grew up. And he took me to Tommy Siebert and pointed at me and said to Tommy, "This is your next VTAS graph." So Tommy trained me to be a VTAS graph, and I started doing monthly tournaments at Northbrook. And then I started getting involved in regionals. I did a US Open, and I kind of just started traveling around with my dad to regionals over the summer. And that was my job as a high school student. And there was nothing better than being a VTAS graph in high school.
How hard was it for you to learn how to be a VTAS graph?
It wasn't hard at all. I grew up around my dad shooting a lot. So it was, kind of second nature to me, but I really enjoyed the rule side of it and, getting to meet all the different people and be involved in the industry and that from that perspective.
Okay, so move forward a little bit. You work in at you mentioned Northbrook for the World English. You did a great job there. I think I've told you that before. Tell me how that process went for you.
So that process started, I graduated high school early. So I went up and saw Brett, probably January, the year of the World English. And I said, if you need any extra hands with any projects, let me know. And he did. So what kind of started is handling a couple small projects turned into me having the opportunity to be a part of just about every aspect of the shoot. So that was anything from sponsors and vendors to trappers to the hospitality side of it, setting the Guinness World Record for the longest clay target shot, the media side of it, everything that goes into the World English being a success was something I had the opportunity to be a part of, which was phenomenal.
Yeah. What's some difficulties you faced being your first time doing this?
I think the biggest difficulty and probably the biggest hurdle I had to learn was you may be on plan Z of the day, but you have to make sure everybody else thinks that you're on plan A and what's happening is exactly what should be happening. And that was quite a life lesson in and of itself going through that event.
Well, you did a good job. You'd have never known that was your first major event by any means.
Well, thank you. It was a blast.
And you've also gone on to do a few more shoots after the World English, right?
I have, yes.
Or what tournaments are those?
So I've done the North Central at Northbrook twice. And then I did the North Central with Pete Malloy last year. Mm-hmm. And I was involved with helping Jimbo Geisler down at Cubby Rise for the South Central until Mother Nature had other plans for us. I just got home from the Western Regional out in Tucson, which was a great tournament. And I also helped out Maria and Fred Finisi at the Gator Cup.
I was at Pete Malloy's place. It seemed great. Gator Cup seemed great. So it looks like you're doing a good job what you're doing.
Thank you.
You saw a need for sporting refs and ones that were trained better. Kind of go into that a little bit. How did you come up with an idea to fix this?
So it kind of stemmed from being a FETASC ref for so many years. Is the great thing about FETASC refs is they're willing to travel, and you have this huge database that FETASC refs are all put in nationally. So anytime a shoot has a big regional or is in need of FETASC refs, it's really easy. You pull up a spreadsheet and you've got a list of a ton of people that you're able to call and are willing to, at the drop of a hat, come and travel for you. Unfortunately, sporting refs are a completely different story. So obviously sporting refs, it's a little bit of an easier job than being a FETASC ref, but the same rules and same theories apply. And the biggest issue I saw was sporting refs have a very difficult time understanding that shooters are in a competitive environment, and they don't always know how to respect that competitive environment. Mm-hmm. And that typically comes from, a lack in their training, or they just haven't had the time taken to explain that to them. So, after doing one or two shoots, I started to realize that we can start to kind of change the way sporting refs are trained and hopefully see an improvement in what they're able to do out on the course. So my dad and I sat down and started to realize that if we built a training program very similar to how I was trained when I became a FETASC ref, we might start to see some better results. And that's kind of how it started.
All right, answer this. Why are the sporting refs not willing to travel like the FETASC refs?
I think it comes down to two things. There's a big difference in what sporting refs and FETASC refs are trained. So that's number one. And then number two is just the pure numbers of it. You need so many more sporting refs than you do FETASC refs. So it's hard on clubs to assume that cost of having to cover travel and hotel rooms and front that cost when you can, rather easily dive into your local community for sporting refs.
And because of all this, you saw a need in industry to start a business that handles this.
Yes.
And now that is called High Overall Sports Management. Go into that a little bit.
So when I had the opportunity and people started to hear that I was willing to do shoots outside of just Northbrook, I kind of saw an opportunity to grow this into a business plan and a business model. So this year, I really started to put a name to it, which is High Overall Sports Management. And, I offer a lot of other services besides just the referee program, but that is the thing that people are very drawn to because there hasn't been the sort of structure and organization regarding sporting trappers in the industry before.
What all does High Overall Sports Management offer other than just refs?
So we look a lot at sponsorship and vendor recruitment and management. That's a very big part of what we do. I've had the opportunity to have, close relationships with a lot of the industry's big sponsors and big companies. So I have those connections that I'm able to put to good use when it comes to needing sponsors. I also offer individualized marketing campaigns for regionals, as well as hospitality, team development and management, and then obviously the referee program.
The sponsor recruitment and management, is this for clubs or businesses, or is this for individuals also?
So at the moment, it's just clubs. If I had the opportunity to go into the individual market, I absolutely would be all over that.
What is involved with recruiting sponsors for clubs, and how difficult is it?
So it's actually a very interesting process, and it always changes a little bit, depending regionally where you're at. So, for example, typically what it starts with is I build a sponsorship packet and I build it based off of the club we're working with. So, for example, when we build one for Northbrook, it may be structured a little differently than when we build one for Tucson, when we build one for 10 miles. So the reason for that is I try and take into consideration what the club has offered in past years, what they're capable of offering, and regionally, what companies have typically come to the shoots and been sponsors. So the success we've seen in making sponsorships more individualized and targeted to certain companies, they've seen bigger results and better results on their end for buying into the shoot and being a sponsor. So once we build the sponsorship packet, I reach out to a lot of sponsors. I make personal phone calls to them. We plan about a year to 9 months in advance and plan their calendars and make sure that they're in the spots that they think they can grow and they can see the most success in.
Marketing campaigns for the shoots. What sort of campaigns are you doing?
So I've started to dive into social media with those marketing campaigns. The shooting industry doesn't always have a huge social media platform when it comes to marketing for regionals.
Right.
So I've started to get into that. And again, it is individualized to what the shoot is looking for, what their needs are, and what they would like to see out of it.
Well, when you figure out how that works, let me know, because I can't seem to get no sort of advertisement on Facebook. If it's got something to do with a gun, I've noticed they just kind of block you.
Right?
Yeah. So team development and management. This interests me a little bit. Tell me how you develop a team, and I'm assuming you do this so that they're the best suited for the event. Is that right?
Yes. So team development and management, it is a very blanket statement. Team development and management is actually something that I've learned a lot from Joey and Melissa Wright with Shoot Technology Systems. Mm-hmm. So they have been instrumental in helping me grow my business and get into different areas. So what that means is if you're a regional that has never thrown a regional before, let's say, and you've never hired a course manager, you're not really sure what direction to go in with course setters or target setters, Mm-hmm. You're not really sure where to go with your people. We sit down and we have a meeting of what your goals are, again, regionally where you're located, and the best way to bring people in that can work together and throw the best regional. And those are always very interesting conversations to have. And my role in that is to kind of facilitate that conversation and put the person whose club we're going to, put them in contact with the right people.
Your business does all of this. So it'll get you sponsorships, vendors, the hospitality, a good team, and the refs, everything, all of that.
Yes, it is the total package.
Trappers that you've dealt with. Where are you finding trappers when you can't find trappers?
That's a great question. So I've worked with a number of different organizations. The first one we worked with during our pilot program for the referee program was Boots for Troops.
Mm-hmm.
They're a veteran organization based out of Texas. And we saw a lot of success with them in kind of one area of the country. And they were a great organization to work with our first time through. They have a good outreach to people, but they didn't quite have the national outreach that we were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So the next program or the next organization I worked with was the Fallen Outdoors, who Cameron Hicks kind of facilitated that connection for me.
Mm-hmm.
And they have been phenomenal. They've been a great organization in the Chicago and Midwest area. But again, that national outreach, they don't quite have what we're looking for. And when I say national outreach, what I mean is no matter where a regional is thrown, no matter what shoot we go to, I could pick up the phone and call the Fallen Outdoors and say, hey, I need 30 people, and they'd be able to find me those 30 people. That we're struggling with to find that key organization that has that outreach that we need. So those are the two veteran organizations I've worked with. And then I've also had a lot of success with community college athletic departments, interestingly enough. Their athletes are hardworking, they're dependable, reliable, and they're always willing to learn and do something that makes a little bit of money.
How do you find these do you just call around and see if somebody has people that are willing to help? Is that what you do?
Yes, it does kind of boil down to that. What I try and do first is look at where that shoot is, wherever we're working, and try and kind of figure out what the community looks like. Some communities, for example, have big American Legion programs.
Mm-hmm.
You sometimes can find a lot of veterans in the American Legion program. Others, for example, have big community colleges with huge athletic departments. With 200 to 300 athletes. So it just kind of depends what that local community we're working with. And that kind of sends me in a better direction of where I think I'll find the people we're looking for.
Okay, so say you get the Fallen Outdoors or whoever it is that you're using. How do you pay these people?
So that is completely up to them.
Okay.
Typically, what we've done with the veteran organizations is whatever the agreed upon amount per day is, we pay them per person per day, and we write a donation check to them at the end of the shoot. So that is the most ideal situation for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it's a donation to a great organization. That's number one. Number two is it is so much easier for shoot management on a Sunday night when you're trying to run shoot-offs and you're trying to get done to just write one check and be done with it and know that your sporting refs have been taken care of. And thirdly, if it's going to a 501c3 organization, there are tax benefits to that.
So say you get with one of these organizations and they have these people that have never been a trapper before. Give me the process. What's next?
So once we get our people recruited and committed that they're able to work those days, we bring them in for their training day. And we typically tell them up front that their training is going to take between 2 and 3 hours. And ideally, I keep the groups at 10 to 15 people. I definitely try not to go over 15 people just for the sake of clarity and time. So what that training program looks like is we start with what we call a classroom session. And they all get personal training packets. And it steps them through the very basic process of what they're going to do out on the course as a sporting ref. It goes over safety, goes over scorecards, master sheets, even goes down to making sure you don't walk away with the scorecards. And then a big conversation that we have with them in the classroom session is understanding that every single shooter out there is competing and understanding that part of their job is to present the same competitive environment to every shooter. And that we've seen a huge success rate with them understanding and kind of grasping that and taking a big responsibility in the work that they're doing out on the course. So following the classroom session of the training process, we then take the refs out on the course and have them ref a couple stations. And we make sure that they're introduced to report pair stations, true pair stations. There's a rabbit out there that they can see, that they're familiar with everything that they could see out on the course. And we often run into that the trap throws a no bird, and then we were able to go into explaining a no bird and the importance of that. And at the end of the training session, we always make sure to show them what a malfunction looks like. Not so much that they can, step through and know the nitty gritty details of a malfunction, but just that they know that's a possibility of what's going to happen out on the course. So it's not a surprise to them when it happens. And that typically helps things keep moving along efficiently when it's game day out on the course.
Yeah.
And after that, typically, if the situation and the environment and kind of everything is right, for those that would like to, we let them shoot. And oftentimes it's a very full circle moment in the training process for the refs is they, understand what a fast or a slow pull feels like, or, when you can't hear your ref say if it's dead or lost, they kind of understand that and they're able to see what a big difference it can make to the competitors.
How do you address that was a wad and not a chip?
So the best way I've found to describe it is I show them a wad, I pick one up off the ground and I show it to them and, show them the difference that it's plastic compared to a clay target.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are able to get them seeing the wad, they can start to clearly tell the difference of, what is that plastic wad and what is the clay target.
What do you do if you have someone in there that doesn't seem like they're the right material for the job? What do you do?
And we run into that quite often. So what we do is I have an evaluation process that I go through with each trapper. And if it seems like they're just not quite going to be able to handle it by themselves, we have two things that we do. Number one is we can pair them up with someone who they're comfortable with, and they can just push the button or do the score and kind of figure out what they'd be best for. If it really doesn't seem like they're going to work out on the course, we typically can find another area during the shoot that they can be useful.
Some shooters can be rude to trappers. How do you handle that situation in training? How do you prepare them to be ready for that?
Absolutely. So the best way I found to describe it is to understand that the shooters are competing and that they do put a lot of pressure on themselves. And if a shooter is rude to a trapper, that it is within their wheelhouse as a ref to say something about it and to say something politely and just remind them that, hey, we don't need to talk like that. Please act in a proper way, kind of find a way to say it nicely. And if it doesn't work, I always have them call myself or the course manager to come over and handle that conversation.
So are you riding around the course during a tournament?
Yes, I am. So the tournaments that I am at, which is just about every single one that I can get to, I'm out on the course while any of our trappers are out there. And I kind of act as a helping hand to the course manager. Anything they need backup, I'm there for them.
Say you're going to, let's use say Northbrook, and they say, we have trained refs. How do you know if they're really trained to do the job?
If they're trappers that I haven't trained,
mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're put in a position where you kind of have to trust that they have been trained. Otherwise, you can kind of tell by having a conversation with them. If you have the time up front to just have a 5-minute conversation with them about being a ref, you can kind of get a pretty good gauge on what they've done and what their experience level is. And if it seems lower than what's ideal, then we'll go ahead and pair them up with someone.
What are some of the positions that they can be put in that aren't that comfortable for them?
Sure. I think the biggest thing or biggest position that a trapper can be put in that makes them uncomfortable, and it's uncomfortable on both the shooter and trapper side, is if a trapper calls a target dead or lost and the shooter or the squad disagrees with that call, understanding that the trapper sitting in that seat, it's a good chance it's their first time and they've never been exposed to an environment like this, that if there is a discrepancy in score, to just understand where that trapper is coming from. They've probably been out there for 5 hours and their eyes are tired, and just give them the courtesy to say, oh, I don't think that was correct. Ask the squad and just handle it as kind of a civilized conversation. I think that's the biggest thing that trappers can run into. That just becomes an intimidating situation for them.
As you being a trapper and someone, you called a lost bird and the guy said, I hit the target. What is your process? What do you do? Ask the squad, or do you just say, no, you didn't hit it?
So the way I always handled it in FETASC was, give them the benefit of the doubt. If I know that target was a lost target, I'll kind of stick to my guns. If I'm not sure. We're all human. We make mistakes. You ask the squad, and 9 times out of 10, the squad is honest with you. And, there's always a person in there that you can kind of normally trust. So that's the same process I tell our refs when we train them is ask the rest of the squad. It's, yes, they're shooting with their friends. Yes, they're shooting with their buddies, but you can typically rely on the fact that the people in the squad are going to be honest.
Knowing that these people get paid, that refs get paid, they do a job that is needed. Without them, you can't have a shoot. I wonder why they're so hard to get.
I ask myself that every time we do a shoot. I think it's because you need so many of them. And the biggest thing is you can have, a rule of thumb is if you need 35, you find 45 to 50, just because you always have someone who can't make it, they're sick, whatever the problem is, and you end up kind of right around that 35 number that you need. The biggest problem is getting them to come back the next day sometimes, or they've worked Thursday through Saturday and they're not going to come for Sunday. That almost is a bigger problem sometimes than actually getting them on the front side.
You just have to call some of your backups if that's the case, or you have to go do it. Somebody has to do it.
Right. Then someone has to go do it. Right. Exactly.
Where do you see this business of yours or this program in the future?
So ideally, where I see this business going, once I get out of college next year, I would love to take this business into different industries. I would love to see it in the equestrian industry, kind of take it outside of just NSCA events.
So this you want this to be your full-time job?
Ideally, yes. This is what it is.
Nice. Well, that's there's nothing wrong with that. It sounds like it'd be a challenging job. That's right. Why I'm not doing it. And you are. Have you ever shot, Julia?
Yes, I have. I probably shouldn't say this on this platform, but I did actually grow up shooting skeet with my dad.
Well, why did you stop?
So I shot skeet probably for 2 or 3 years pretty consistently. I shot in our winter league with my dad. And honestly, it came down to time. And it was a little bit, you got to make a decision between shooting and riding. And I had been riding for so long and kind of saw where I wanted to go with riding. So I chose that, but I still shoot with my dad when I can. And I constantly remind him that my claim to fame is I did beat him once in a winter league in skeet. So constantly remind him of that.
Isn't Jim on Team USA?
He is, yes.
That's what I thought. Okay. I'll have to ask him about that next time I see him. What do you have planned for, the rest of the year, 22, 23? Is there anything coming up that you're a part of?
Sure. So the rest of this year is definitely our busiest year so far. So I will be at the South Central at Providence Hill, and then I will be going to the North Central at Northbrook, and I will wrap up our year at the Southeast at Joey and Melissa Wright's place in Tennessee. For next year, looking at 2023, we've got 2 shoots on the calendar so far. We've got the U.S. Open, which I'm real excited about. And we also have the Western Regional in Colorado at a new club at Long Meadow, which will be a great tournament. All
right. U.S. Open next year. Where's that at?
So that is at Tucson Trap and Skeet. That's at Tim Miles' place.
Okay. And then the Western Regional in Colorado. I might have to. I've never been to the Western Regional because it's so far. But if it's in Colorado, I may have to go to that.
You absolutely should. Absolutely should. It's going to be great.
If someone or a club or whoever wants to get in touch with you about you handling this for them, how do they go about doing that?
So I'm not a hard person to get in touch with. They can find us on Instagram and Facebook now at HOA Sports Management. And they can also get in touch with me by phone or email, and that's on all of our social media pages.
I'll say this, that from the shoots that I've been to that you've been at, they've all ran smooth, and you've always had a smile on your face and ready to help anybody that needed help. So I think you'll do a great job with this. And if any clubs are looking for someone to head this up for them, then you need to call Julia for sure.
Well, thank you, Justin. I appreciate that.